Are we ready?
You're just gonna take over.
I am. He told me on the chart.
Bill told you good for you. Yeah, just go ahead. Just go.
But we've got
You better get Ambassador Brown back up. Yeah, we need Brown back up here. Ask him to come up.
Ambassador.
We, so we've given Keisha a mic. She's a former. What grade did you teach?
Yeah, I taught 4th and 5th grade.
Get
So-
these people. Get these people in their seats. Maybe like clap or something.
Let's see if you can hear my voice instead of teaching.
Touch your nose, touch your ears, touch your mouth.
She's giving.
Oh, right, right, right.
You can hear me. Yeah.
Hannah, how are you?
What continent are you on today? What continent are you on
Oh, I
today?
know. Yeah, the Texas continent.
Hello, all.
Yeah, exactly.
Particularly after you beat OU.
I know, right? Yeah.
So good to be here. And I have to say, I'm very impressed with these young people here in the corner. Can we give them another hand? I'm a former teacher, as I said, so I have a soft spot for young people who are just thoughtful, involved, and engaged. So I'm really glad you guys are here. I am Keisha Russell. I'm senior counsel at First Liberty Institute, and I'm going to let our panelists introduce themselves.
I'm Jeff Mateer, and you won't be able to tell during this panel, but I'm actually her boss.
Not right now.
Not right now. She's the boss of me today on this panel for a short amount of time, but I'm the Executive Vice President and Chief Legal Officer at First Liberty.
I'm Hannah Smith. I'm Associate Director at the International Center for Law and Religion Studies at BYU Law School, and I'm also on the Board of Advisors for the DFW Summit.
I'm Sam Brownback. I chair the International Religious Freedom Summit. It takes place every year. I'm a friend of Bill Bennick, which I want to recognize Bill for this work that he's done and spread around the country. Also, I'd like to congratulate Texas on beating OU over the weekend. I was watching. That was quite a wipeout. So if you're an OU fan, sorry. Anyway, glad to join you here on the panel.
Great. So, as I said, I work for First Liberty Institute, and one of my favorite things about working for First Liberty is that we represent all religions, and I recognize that the wins that we have will help everyone, whether you're religious or not. And so I want to start there, and I want to talk about one of our most recent wins at First Liberty, the Groff case, and how that case, and maybe some others, particularly in the marketplace, how do those wins help all religions and not just, say, someone who's Christian?
So, and if I can, I'm going to wind back just one step, if that's
please
okay,
do. Yes.
with your permission.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to start with a statement that I want you just to think about. We currently, in the United States of America, not just Texas, the United States of America, we have the opportunity for more religious freedom than we've ever had in our lifetime. That right now, based upon rulings from the United States Supreme Court, which includes the Groff case, we have more religious freedom than we've ever had in our lifetime. Now, Hannah I'll give her the opportunity to rebut that, but she's not going to convince me. Because on this one, I'm pretty sure I'm right. Since 2018, religious liberty proponents have won 11 cases at the United States Supreme Court.
You should go back further than that. We had a lot of wins before that, too.
Well, I count because then I get to say 4 of the 11 are First Liberty wins. My friends at Beckett had several as well. But we're living in a time, I think the point being, we are living in a time, and I use the phrase opportunity because I don't think we often walk or live in the opportunity that we have for religious freedom. And what's great is it's religious freedom not just for white evangelical Christians, not for Roman Catholics, not for any particular Christian sect, but it's for all people. And I do think, Keisha, the Groff case represents that. And so the Groff case is a case that was decided a year ago in 2023 at the Supreme Court, in which First Liberty represented a postman. And this postman, who actually had been on the mission field, comes back to Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, in the home of the Amish. And he wants to be able to serve in his church. And so he's looking around, what's a job that I wouldn't have to work on Sundays? And literally a friend says, well, you know what? Be a postman. They don't work on Sundays. And that was great until the evil company Amazon showed up. Amazon's not sponsoring this, are they, Bill? Well, okay, all right, just making
Careful,
sure.
I just ordered from Amazon.
Amazon.
I'm actually
Well, of
pretty
course
fond
we all. They come to
of
my
the
house every
convenience,
day.
frankly.
But Amazon, of course, does a deal with the post office, and therefore postmen now have to deliver on Sundays.
I thought you were going to say does a deal with the devil, and now they have to deliver on Sundays.
Well, that's maybe. And so Gerald asked for something that every employee in America has a right to, which is when your employer's asking you to do something that violates or contradicts your religious beliefs, you can ask for a religious accommodation. And so Gerald asked for a religious accommodation. Look, I'll work overtime during the week. I'll do more shifts. I'll pull in, but I can't work on Sundays because that's my Sabbath. And for a while, the post office said that was okay, but eventually the post office has said, no, we can't do that. And Gerald brought a case in Pennsylvania. He lost at the district court, then he lost at the Court of Appeals. The reason he lost at both the district court and the Court of Appeals is a horrible decision from 1977. And a Republican-dominated Supreme Court at that time, with the Republican members ruling against him. And actually it was Thurgood Marshall, who has an awesome dissent, dissented from an opinion that said that the words undue hardship mean de minimis. So only in America, at the Supreme Court in the 1970s, could the words undue hardship mean de minimis. De minimis just means if it's any little burden, then the employer wins, and you don't have to accommodate the employee. Now, that's a horrible law for persons of every faith, because what it essentially means is that any employee who wants a religious accommodation is never going to have to be accommodated. Well, in the Groff case, we appealed that loss in the Court of Appeals to the United States Supreme Court. And the reason why it's such a great case for people of all faiths and all of us who are employees, because the court said, no, the words undue burden, undue hardship actually mean undue hardship, radical concept. They don't mean de minimis. And so an employee has the opportunity to show that he should be accommodated unless the employer shows that it's an undue hardship. Now, what's amazing about that case and talking about common ground, anybody want to guess how many justices agreed with that decision? All of them, unanimous. And so that in itself, that case is it is a great case, and we're starting to see now at First Liberty the impact of that case in the workplace. Because again, it applies to every person of faith who's being asked to do something that violate their religious beliefs in the workplace.
Excellent job.
I knew you would say that.
Well,
And
like
we
I
have to
said,
thank our Seventh-day Adventist friends, too. They've been working on teeing up that Groff case for decades.
They have, and you know what was neat is in that case, we had so much support in Friends of the Court briefs across the spectrum of religion. I mean, from Hindus to Muslims and our co-counsel, the Seventh-day Adventists, across the spectrum supporting it because everyone recognized what a great opportunity it was.
So, Hannah, I want to talk to you about education because I feel like one of the reasons we have, I think, a lot of conflicts when it comes to people talking about religious freedom is because of the way we're educated and what we believe religious freedom actually means. Is it just for Christians? Is it for everybody? And I think that really does start in the classroom when we talk about the First Amendment and the Free Exercise Clause, and we teach people that this does apply to everybody. So why don't you start with the education cases?
Happily, thank you so much. Because this is a CLE session, I prepared a little bit more substantively so those lawyers out there can faithfully say that they got their legal education checked off today. But I do want to start with a case out of the Ninth Circuit, and it involves the intersection of anti-discrimination laws and the First Amendment. This case was actually decided about a year ago, and then there was a case that was decided just this last summer in the District of DC. And these two cases are really important because they go to the issue of religious student clubs in public school districts around the country. Since I'm in Texas, I know many of y'all will understand the impact of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes Club that they have on middle schoolers and high schoolers around the country. There are about 7,000 student chapters around the U.S. Well, this case out of the Ninth Circuit was an interesting one because the San Jose School District basically said, FCA, Fellowship for Christian Athletes, you can't be an official student club anymore because your policy of only electing student leaders that affirm your statement of faith that marriage is between a man and a woman and your chastity pledge, that violates our anti-discrimination policy. And so we're no longer going to be able to sponsor you as an official student club. That means you can't meet on campus. That means you can't advertise your meetings through our official channels. You are cut off, and basically sent them away. And originally, this lawsuit was brought in the district court, and the district court affirmed that decision and said, yeah, that's fine. This anti-discrimination policy trumps the other arguments that are made in this case. But the en banc Ninth Circuit, which is not known for generally coming down on the side of religious freedom in many of its cases, actually found in favor of FCA. And I should note this case was brought by the Beckett Fund, where I worked previously. And the Beckett Fund successfully argued that this was not a policy that was applied in a non-discriminatory way. So essentially you have a non-discrimination policy that's discriminatory itself. And I won't bore you with all the legal rules, but there is a case that the US Supreme Court decided back in 1990 called Employment Division v. Smith, and it said, if you have a generally applicable law that doesn't have any exceptions, then it can be upheld against a First Amendment challenge. But if there are exceptions or if government officials are allowed to make individualized exceptions or there's some other exceptions in Smith, then a First Amendment challenge may prevail. Well, essentially, Beckett argued that this fell outside of that Smith regime, that there were exceptions that were made to this non-discrimination policy, and that the school district had done so in a viewpoint discriminatory manner. So they had made exceptions for other clubs that weren't religious and said, that's fine, you can have student leaders that abide by your classification or your leadership criteria, but when it comes to the religious clubs, you can't have student leaders that are based on your religious criteria. So that was a discriminatory application of the non-discrimination policy and therefore was a violation, and the Ninth Circuit said, FCA, you get to be a student club again, and the school district can't kick you off campus anymore. Well, there was a similar case that came up in the District of DC just this last year in July, and the district court there looked at this great Ninth Circuit opinion and said, yeah, we think that applies here, both under RFRA. Remember, RFRA was the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. In a case previously, the court held that it was struck down as to the states, but RFRA still applies to the federal government and DC. And so this case arose in the DC school district, and they applied RFRA and the First Amendment to say you can't kick FCA off campus because you have secular clubs that have leadership positions based on secular criteria, and you're not applying this non-discrimination policy against them either. So those two cases, I think, really bode well for these kinds of challenges on public school campuses. You know, about 20 years ago now, we were seeing this happen on college campuses around the country, religious student groups getting kicked off of college campuses based on these kinds of all-comers policies and these non-discrimination policies. Well, now it's happening in our K through 12 public education system, and it's really good to see that the law is upholding these religious groups' rights to be on campus, just like the secular student groups' rights to be on campus are upheld as well. The other group of cases that I think are really important to touch base on in the education space are some of these opt-out policy cases. You may have heard of some of these. I'm going to just talk about two of them. You all are very familiar, I'm sure, if you have kids in the public school system, you're familiar with an opportunity to opt out of instruction if you don't want your child to be part of that instruction. As a parent, I know we get notifications all the time about different curricula, whether it be sex ed or other types of curricula that are being taught. They ask, do you want your kid to be in this discussion or not? And if you don't, you can opt your kid out and they can go to study hall instead. Well, this has been the tradition in the United States for a very, very, very long time, that parents have this opportunity to opt their children out of specific instruction that they disagree with. The research that I've done shows that there are about 38 states that require opt-out for parents. 6 states have a combination of opt-out and opt-in policies. Opt-in policies mean you have to affirmatively opt in your child to that instruction. 4 are opt-in before instruction may begin. You have to do an opt-in only. And then 3 are silent, but they don't ban opt-outs. And that's going to be relevant in a little bit. I'm going to talk to you first about the Tatel case, and then we're going to talk about the Mahmoud case. The Tatel case is out of the Western District of Pennsylvania, and this case involved a first grade teacher who decided without any notice or any opportunity to opt out that she was going to observe Transgender Awareness Day by reading some non-curricular books and presenting non-curricular gender identity topics to her students in class. During the classroom presentation, she told her students that when children are born, parents make a guess about whether their child is a boy or girl, and sometimes parents are wrong. And predictably, some of the children after that conversation were quite confused with what their teacher had told them. So the court in that case held for the parents and said that the teacher had violated the parents' substantive due process rights and their free exercise rights by presenting this information without any notice to the parents and without any right to opt their children out of that instruction. So compare that to the Montgomery County case, which is still ongoing. This is the Mahmoud case. I gave you the statistics about 38 states requiring opt-outs and the rest of them either requiring opt-in or just being silent about the issue. Well, Montgomery County School District is the only school district that I know of. Do you know of any others? No. Yeah, I don't think there are any others. That has reversed this nationwide tradition that has gone on for a very, very long time. And not only did they say we're silent about the opt-out issue, but they affirmatively banned opt-outs for parents in their school district. So if parents don't want their children to be part of a curriculum that involves sexual identity or gender identity, too bad, so sad. Your children has to stay in, and you don't have any rights as a parent to pull your child out. So the district court actually distinguished the Tatel case that I just talked about from Pennsylvania, the First Amendment, the first grade teacher rather. They distinguished that case and they basically said this opt-out policy that bans parents from being able to opt their children out does not burden the free exercise rights of those families because there's no showing of indoctrination or coercion of the religious children. And unfortunately, the record was so thin that up on appeal at the Fourth Circuit basically said we have to affirm the district court because we don't have enough evidence in the record to actually do our own independent evaluation of whether or not there's enough here to be meritorious at this stage of the litigation. So it's affirmed, and now it's up on a cert petition at the U.S. Supreme Court. So that those cases I think we're going to see more of as we see these challenges to opt-out provisions. And then I'll just end with this final issue involving the Department of Education and the DOE guidance on transgender students. This is really a hot topic right now because the U.S. Department of Education has produced documents giving guidance to school districts regarding transgender students, and they were effective August 1st. There were several lawsuits around the country that challenged this DOE guidance. Here in Texas, Attorney General Paxton brought a lawsuit challenging this guidance for Texas schools, and in August, the federal district court held in favor of the Attorney General's arguments and stopped the enforcement of this guidance in Texas schools. There are about 26 other states where lawsuits were also brought, and in those 26 states, there are now temporary injunctions in place while those lawsuits play out in court. And we'll see whether those lawsuits are successful under Title IX or whether the guidance changes pending the presidential election. But I think it's really important to say that a lot of these sort of progressive ideologies are finding their way into our school systems and finding our way into the classroom in public schools. And I think parents are really standing up and fighting back. And a lot of these lawsuits, I think, are at the heart of the Yoder case, which was decided a long time ago when the Supreme Court said, parents have a fundamental right in choosing the education of their children. And we're going to see how that plays out, I think, in this very hot button issue of transgender issues in public schools.
So, Hannah, Jeff implied earlier that you don't agree that we have
No.
more religious freedom now than we did before. And I actually want to get the ambassador's thoughts on this about the differences between what was going on, say, 25 years ago, 50 years ago, and what's happening.
I actually agree with Jeff.
The
I agree
ambassador's
with Jeff.
older?
Yeah.
See, this is what I was looking for here, people.
Thank you.
Let's go.
Let me quote a U.S. Supreme Court justice on this point, if I could, because I think we've got the best Supreme Court we have ever had for free exercise and religious freedom. I don't think there's any that would ever come close to this. And I think what they put their finger on is the huge diversity of America, and the only place you can make this, only way you can make this place work is if you guarantee everybody's right to free exercise, peaceful free exercise. Now, you can't go blowing up a building, but the peaceful free exercise is what you've got to have. And the human right of religious freedom is the right that's closest to the soul. I mean, it's the human right of the soul, in my estimation. So this is closest to who you are, and it's got to be fundamentally protected. My quote of a Supreme Court justice isn't in any opinion, but is a conversation I had with Justice Alito. And I was getting concerned about what was happening to religious freedom in the United States. I'd worked on the topic overseas for years, and I started seeing it declining in the United States and having trouble here. This is several years ago, so I can show my age a little bit, not hugely. But I said, are we going to have religious freedom in America? And he said, yes, you're going to have it in the law. I'm not sure you're going to have it in the culture, but you will have it in the law. And I thought that's actually then what we've started to experience quite a bit. We formed up, I helped form 2 years ago, the National Committee for Religious Freedom. Broad, diverse group of different religions to fight for religious freedom issues in the United States. We opened a bank account at Chase Bank. I go to put some more money in it 45 days later, and the clerk there says, I'm sorry, your account's been closed. It says here on the screen, it was closed at corporate. It's non-revocable. You can't change this, and I'm not supposed to tell you anything else. Oh, really? And I thought I used to be in the Senate, governor, and I thought, this is just the exact kind of challenge I want. Just go ahead, debank me. Let's talk about this for a while. So we got debanked. But this is my point here, is that we weren't ever given any reasons. And at the end of the day, we pursued this up through the chain all the way to a shareholder resolution at J.P. Morgan's annual meeting that we lost big. but had got the CEO, Jamie Dimon, to make comments about it. We got 5 different answers eventually. I mean, first they said, we're not going to tell you. We aren't going to change it. And then they said, well, we're concerned with terrorist financing and money laundering. And I'm going, yeah, right. I'm sure I'm going to do those sort of things. Then you're politically exposed, and then it was bad customer service, and then, all these different reasons. But at the end of the day, what we found by protesting this was I got contacted by 15 to 20 different groups that the same thing had happened to them. Generally socially conservative, sometimes parachurch, religiously affiliated, and it seemed to be centered around some sort of idea of reputational risk of the company. They thought, we don't want to be associated with people like you that have a conservative bent. That was a cultural issue, a cultural comment that people were making. And I just think the important thing we've got to do is to really call these things out and stand up for it, particularly in a society as diverse as America, and particularly in a country as important as America on the topic of religious freedom. Any ground you lose here on religious freedom will be magnified around the world. We have a huge impact globally. If we broadly define this right of free exercise and religious freedom, if we practice it that way, if we push back when people get persecuted for whatever reason, whether you agree with them religiously or not, that's not the issue. The issue is that they have the right to, in public or in private, to peacefully practice their faith, full stop. Or no faith at all, full stop. You have that right, and we've got to fight for that. And so that's what we've been doing in pushing back on this through the National Council for Religious Freedom, National Committee for Religious Freedom, because there's just too much effort in the culture to put just a wet tarp on top of people that have traditional values, or the values that aren't in the mainstream of the culture today, or aren't seen as what maybe some people want to see in the culture. You could look at that. My family lives around a number of Amish people. I think they're fabulous people. I wouldn't want to live that way. I think they're wonderful. I have a number of Orthodox Jewish friends. I think these guys are fantastic. I have a number of Muslim friends. They're wonderful. It's not my faith. I follow Jesus. But the fact of the matter is that we've got to protect this for everybody, and we've got to push for it aggressively. And Texas is a key place to do this. All these companies that are headquartered now in Texas, and people that work there, we've got to constantly push on people to say, this has to be protected, whether you agree with them or not. It has to be protected. And that's the only way we can operate this wide open society, and the only way we're going to have a free world.
So you mentioned earlier that we would have religious freedom in the law, even if we don't have it in the culture. So I guess I want to ask all of you, why do you think the culture doesn't respect religious freedom? Do you think this is just because of the clash between, say, sexuality and gender, those issues? Or do you think they have deeper and more valid concerns that as litigators in this area and advocates that we have a responsibility to respond to?
First. That's a really good question. You didn't preview that with me beforehand. But it is a good question, and I think there are probably a lot of different ways to tackle it. One of it is it's our fault as faithful of people of faith. I think in so many ways, we in the past have taken, and certainly speaking as, again, a white evangelical Christian, that we've taken our position of power and authority, and we've abused that power and authority. And so in one way, we're reaping, using a Bible phrase, we're reaping what we're sowing. And what that has caused is we had a nation that was founded at least on principles that we had respect for religion. And we thought religion was good. and that religion was positive, and religion had a great benefit on society. And for most of American history, and of course there are horrible things that happened in the name of religion in America, but generally we thought it was a positive good. And we came to a period of time, at least in my lifetime, where it became sort of, it was just, maybe it's good for you, but not for me, and we're gonna be sort of neutral. Where I think today, in so many segments of our culture, religion is viewed as negative. It's negative, and there's just hostility towards any religious practice and any religious presence. I mean, I take, my friends there, the Wessons, and what other than having an historic African-American church, and you all heard about that history of that church, why would a community not welcome them with open arms and see, their heart to reconcile, their heart to minister? Why wouldn't a community want them in there? They're the only church in the city of Addison. I don't know if you caught that. The only church in the city of Addison. In the city of Addison, in the heart of I think this is the heart of the Bible Belt. It's certainly close to the heart of the Bible, saying, we don't need them. I know that in our case as Keisha, we're seeing so many other communities who are telling local churches, oh, you can't open your doors to house the homeless. We don't want that in our city. Or you can't have a food ministry. We don't want you attracting those people into our town. If you feed them, then maybe they'll come and they'll be fed and we'll have problems. And that's in, Ohio and Florida and Colorado, Arizona. And then the other thing that I think is extremely showing disrespect for people of faith is and we're sitting here in the Holocaust Museum, but the absolute, statistically proven rise of anti-Semitism in America today. And in 2023, the FBI just released its hate crime statistics for 2023. In 2023, there are about 12,000 hate crimes that the FBI recorded. 25% of those are directed at people because of their religious beliefs. Of that number, 67% are directed at people of Jewish faith, of the Jewish faith. The next highest group are Muslims at 10%, documented by the FBI. And we know that from our own cases. I think right now at First Liberty, we have 9 cases representing rabbis or Jewish congregations who are being told, we don't want you in our community. And just hateful. What we're finding out in Discovery, it's just an underbelly of America that is just disgusting and hateful, but it's there. But I think we've lost, as a culture, we don't respect religion anymore.
Yeah, well, it's not going to surprise you, Governor Brownback, that I agree with my former boss, Justice Alito, that we do have a very robust religious freedom in the law. But I think our culture needs to catch up with that. And I'll just share this example that was from my other former boss, Seamus Hassan, the founder of the Beckett Fund. He wrote a book called The Right to Be Wrong, which I would encourage all of you to read. And in that book, he talks about how a religion oftentimes is treated like asbestos. Some of you younger folks won't remember this, but asbestos used to be used in the construction of buildings until it was found to be very dangerous to your health. And so there was this huge asbestos remediation program that was undertaken to remove asbestos from all of these different structures. And he compares religion to asbestos, that oftentimes we've accepted this statement of, the separation of church and state, and that there can be no, symbols of religion in our government. There can be no symbols of religion in a public square, and that we have to go in and actively remove every trace of asbestos religion from all of our government structures, from all of our public squares. And I think that sort of hostility to religion has unfortunately taken over some parts of our culture. And I think that it's unfortunately being taught to some of our youngest in the next generation. And so what I think is so important and what I really love to see is this sort of robust pluralism that we talk about, which is, students in our high schools here in Texas, they have these wonderful religious student clubs. When I was on the school board, we had this amazing variety of, the Muslim student club and the Catholic student club and the Bible student club and FCA, the Fellowship for Christian Athletes, and all of these different religious-based student organizations that were on campus in our high schools that showed me that, these young people, they get it. They understand what robust pluralism means, and they're actively living it out in their high schools. We just need to stop messing with it. We need to stop messing it up and telling them that they have to be shy about practicing their faith or saying prayer at school or sharing their thoughts with their fellow students about what they believe. If we can get our students in high school to understand it's okay to share your testimony with your friend who's not a member of your faith, and it's okay for you to hear their testimony, and that doesn't diminish yours and it doesn't diminish theirs, and we can all practice our free speech and share our religious faith in a way that's welcoming and shows that we respect one another, that's a really, really good thing. So I hope that, we'll encourage our kids, pray at school, talk to your friends, invite them to the student religious clubs that you've founded, show them that it's okay. Religion is not asbestos, that we don't have to eradicate it from every corner of public life. And I think when we do that, when we educate our kids, we're going to find that it comes naturally to them, because religion is innate to all of us. It's a natural yearning that we all have to seek for God. And when we do that, they will respond, I think, appropriately. And I think we have hope in the next generation. I really do think that that we can turn this secularism around.
In a real sense, I think it's actually a good sign that is showing up here. She couldn't wear the hijab in France. And they have a real trouble there kind of integrating people into society. The United States, Peggy Noonan wrote an article last week, said, the United States has always been a freak show. And I kind of took a little umbrage at that when I first read it, but she said, we've always been unusual to the rest of the world. The rest of the world looks at this place and goes, what are you guys doing now? What is this? But nobody else has ever attempted or gotten anywhere close to integrating as many people with many stripes and faiths and types into a country as the United States has. And we muddle through it a lot. And it's messy. I grew up 80 miles from Independence, Missouri.
Yeah. Which,
to Hannah, that's where the huge persecution of the LDS took place, run out a generation ago. And so it's been bad. We've had, you heard from the Wessons earlier too. My mom grew up on the property where John Brown would stay when he was in Kansas. Osawatomie Brown. So it's been messy, but actually that's a good thing, because it means it's actually bubbling up and we're dealing with it, and that's what we've got to do with religious freedom is let's get it up, pull it up to the surface, let's deal with it.
That was wonderful. So we only have a couple more minutes. Do I dare take a question? Anyone? Yes, sir.
So Don Weston, White Rock Chapel. I really appreciate this discussion. I found it very enlightening. My concern is the opposite of religious freedom. I think in many parts of our society now we're seeing what I would call religious tyranny. Touch that. For instance, it's Christianity only. Forcibly Christianity and nothing else. How would the panel comment on that, what I would call religious tyranny?
Yeah, I completely disagree with, and I think that's not America. And I think we need to remind people that America is founded on the principle of religious freedom for all. And so if you have one dominated over another, then that's not religious freedom. And so, I mean, I think the tension in the First Amendment between establishment and free exercise, I think the founders were brilliant. Those are the two, and it's the play. And I think it's, again, your boss who talks about the play in the joints, doesn't he? Your former boss, Justice Alito, the play in the joints. And I think that's it. But, you know, wherever in any part of this country that if one religion is being put over another, although I do believe probably I hate to disagree with a client, but I do think it's more the secular versus religion. And I think it's us. It's us together is the greatest threat right now.
Yeah, and I'll just say, oftentimes what I remind people when this conversation comes up about sort of local communities, you know, taking over their school board, or and then once, you know, sort of they're sort of minimizing the opportunity for pluralism on that school board, I remind them there's a reason why the founders put the no religious test clause in the Constitution. There's a reason, right? Because there's not supposed to be a religious test for holding public office in our country. And that's true of the school board, it's true of the President of the United States. And so we have to remember that, you know, religious pluralism needs to be baked in at every level. And that's a really important thing.
But they also wanted a very religious population. They saw us as the founders were given this amazing amount of liberty to a country that this was a brand new experiment at the time. And they thought, some of them at least at the time, this is only due for people that can self-govern. And they saw religion as providing that self-governance, but you got to pick that one yourself. That's your pick. And to me, I'd also say, as a Christian, that's not Christianity. God gives us this freedom. He didn't make us robots, and He even had to send His Son to clean it up. So, I mean, but I hear your point. What I find is people do those sorts of activities and ideas that don't understand their faith as much, or their faith isn't as deep within them. And it really is incumbent upon people who've really worked on their own soul an awful lot to come forward and say, look, I'm with you in faith, but I'm not with you on that. That's wrong. You know, the Ku Klux Klan presented themselves as Christians for a long time. Yeah, you know, and you just kind of going, boy, I don't agree with that one.
Well, thank you so much to our wonderful panelists. Bill?
Will begin at wherever we are here, 4 o'clock, and that will be another shot at the younger generation, this time at the college law school level. We'll see what that turns out to be.